9 months using a doublet, was it really worth it? So back in March of this year, I put together a 66-foot doublet. Now, if you don't know what a doublet is, think of it as similar to a dipole, but it's not monobanded. So instead of feeding it with coax, which my antenna is 66 feet, so that would be a dipole for 40 metres. Mine is an inverted V configuration. I fed it with open wire feeder, or ladder line as some people call it, and that comes into my shack and into a tuner. So that allows me to use this antenna on multiple bands. So the beauty of using this ladder line or open wire feeder is you can use your tuner, and there is I wouldn't say it's negligible, but almost negligible losses in this open wire feeder, how it works, the physics of it. So putting up the doublet gives me a really versatile multi-band antenna. So I built this antenna in March of this year, and what actually pushed me to actually build this antenna is because I got a very kind loan, a long-term loan of a Palstar AT4K, which I've got sitting just next to me here. And because I have the ACOM 1000 amplifier, I wanted to be able to use some power now and again. Now, I don't always use the amplifier, but I wanted it there, that if so, I wanted to be able to use a little bit of power. Now, going back a little bit, the antenna previous to the doublet was actually a commercially built antenna, which is not like me, but it saved me a lot of time. It was an off-center fed dipole. It was made by M0CVO. I'll put a link to that down in the description. It was a special because it was rated at high power, and it would operate on all bands 40 through 10. It was a cross between an off-center fed dipole and a fan dipole, because it had a secondary leg which I think allowed operation of 17 and 12 metres. And generally that was quite a good antenna. The SWR wasn't very good on, I think, 17 and 12, but just, I think, because of how I had it in the garden, and I had to sort of had a bit of a dog leg in it. But for what it was, it worked really well. It worked well on 40, it worked well on 20. I worked down into VKZL a number of times on 20, so it worked. I was reasonably happy with it. But the one band that I was missing, well, I was missing 60, not that I really use it, and I was missing 80. Even trying to listen on that antenna, signals were like, S2, S3, where they should have been 20, 30 over 9. So the doublet was, I think, was a good option to actually look at there. Now, my garden isn't particularly big, so really the biggest I could really get away with was a 66-foot doublet, because if you take into these calculations that Ofcom have put onto this, similar to the guys in the States with FCC, so you've got to have it so far away from the public, I could still run QRO, high power, and get away with it. So it was a reasonably, I'm going to say complex, but there was a lot of elements to actually building this, because I have an aluminium mast, 10 metre aluminium mast in my garden, but I couldn't just run the ladder line up against it, because then it wouldn't work. So you've got to keep ladder line away. If you're running it in parallel, you have to keep it away from metal objects. So I actually just came up with very simple spacers made from PVC waste pipe. I've had a lot of people comment these that won't last. Well, I know they won't last. To bring down that tower takes me literally 10 minutes, and I will make some more, or I'll maybe make more and I'll paint them. But I live in Scotland here. I'm not in Nevada or Arizona, where I'm getting the sun 360 days a year. Like today, it's just pure overcast. So even with these spreaders that I've got to keep them out from the mast, I'm going to get a number of years use from them. So I have I think it's actually about 16 metres of ladder line. Now, the length of your ladder line, open wire feeder, is critical, because it will determine if you can actually match all bands, because remember, you're relying on this tuner that's inside your shack. So I have these 16 metres of open wire feeder. It comes down to a choke. Now, it's a QRO choke, and I've changed it ever so slightly. I went from a coax choke, so a coax round FT243 cores. There was 2 cores, and Steve Ellington actually made a comment. He says if you use basically twin wires paired together, it might help a bit, and it did help a bit. So I actually changed that choke, excuse me, and I now have 3 FT 240-43 cores, and they're wrapped with it's got basically twin, like I would call it twin feed PTFE cable, so it's a real heavy duty high power choke. So the ladder line connects to that, and then the coax, so I have some Messi and Poloni Extra Flex 7 Bury. It comes straight into the shack and then straight into the tuner. So there's exactly 2 meters of coax between that choke and the tuner. So there's very little feeder loss in the system. Okay, so we're talking fractions of a dB, 40 through 10. Now, I thought this would actually be quite easy. I just twiddle the knobs on the tuner and it just works, but it's not just as simple as that. As I said, I've actually lengthened my ladder line somewhat. It was about 13 meters, but I've added about an extra 3 meters onto it. Now the bands that will really readily tune, so I can tune 80, I can tune 60, I could tune 40, 30 is touch and go, but I can do it. 20, I can't do 17. 15, 15 I can get is okay, but getting up near the top of the band, 21 400, I won't get. These are all 1-to-1 SWR showing at the tuner, by the way, 12 meters and then 10 meters. So effectively I've got all band coverage 80 through 10 with the exception of 17 meters. And I had a lot of comments how I could actually change that, and I think what I would need to do is I really need to lengthen the legs of the doublet. And I could probably then get all band coverage. Most people use doublets. I think they use the 100 and whatever it is feet doublet. So it's the next size up, and they seem to get all band coverage. But the longer your antenna is, the more it affects the higher bands, and it puts your radiation pattern really quite skew-with. So I want to talk a bit about my experiences with all the different bands. So 80 meters, it's actually the easiest band to tune on it. Really easy to find a tune. So I've actually made this little cheat card up here. So this gives me starting points, and you can see they've actually tweaked them when I actually tweaked the length of the ladder line. The other side I've got the settings for the ACOM. So this actually helps me get in the ballpark where I start to tune. So I just set my TS590 to 10 watts, and I just find a clear spot, and I hit the transmit button, and then I do the tuning from there. So it's not as convenient as just hitting the button on an auto tuner. I thought it would be quite nice to look at the Palstar. I think it's the HF Auto, but that's a lot of money. And there'll actually be a little bit more loss in that than using this AT4K. Now this AT4K is a beast. So 80 meters actually tunes really, really well. I've worked around about Europe. I've not worked any DX in it, but I've not spent any time on 80 meters. So my mate Tim, he reckons on 80 meters, I've given them the dimensions, he reckons it's between 6 and 8 dB down on a full size dipole or doublet for 80 meters. So that's an S point and a half. Even if we say 2 S points, allowing me to get on 80 meters, chatting round about Europe, I'm happy at that, because that allows me 80 meters where I never had that before. So that band is a real bonus. 60, I've never been on 60 apart from just trying to tune it. 40 meters, it works exceptionally well. Really, I can't really say it works any better than the off-center fed dipole that I had before it, because they're fundamentally the same length. So I've worked all over the place, in at the States. I've worked Brian down in ZL on 40 meters, which I was really surprised. He told me he was on 40, went down there, and he was a great signal. I was really surprised. And I've worked Rolly down in ZL as well. So 40 meters, it works really, really well. 30, briefly used it on 30, but it's not one of my bands that I use, but it does work. 20 meters, it works really, really well, and I think because it's a full wave, effectively a full wave on 20 meters, I'm still getting a reasonable radiation pattern with it. So I've worked VK a number of times. I've worked Brian and Rolly down in ZL a number of times as well with this. So it works really, really well. I've not done a lot of comparisons, so I had phased verticals up in the garden just a few weeks ago there, and I did some brief A-B comparisons, and the signal down in VK, so the doublet was maybe 1 S unit down, or half an S unit it wasn't much, so the phased verticals in my garden marginally outperformed it. But remember, this doublet has an omnidirectional pattern, so it worked really, really well. So that I thought, you know, when I did that comparison, I thought, you know, that's really, really good. 15 metres, it works excellent on 15 metres. And how do I kind of quantify that? South America in particular, especially if I'm running a little bit of power, it can be like shooting fish in a barrel. Brazil, Argentina, great signals, great stations, brilliant. 17 metres, which I touched on there, I can't get a match below 3-1. So what I did was I actually built another antenna. I built an NFED, but not with a ferrite core. I used something called an LC match. I'll link that video down in the description. So I've got a remote antenna switch just under my shelf here. So I just flip that switch, really convenient. I don't need to tune or anything. And I have 17 metres. Now that is sloping west. So the bulk of that signal is going towards North America. It works really, really well. Working states stuff, really easy. So that's 17 metres covered. I touched on 15 there, works really, really well. 12 metres, I've just listened, I've not transmitted on 12 metres, but that's where the antenna starts to falter a little bit. And how do I mean that it starts to falter? Because the antenna gets longer in comparison to the frequency, so our radiation patterns go a bit skew-with. So going up to 10 metres, that's where I notice the biggest difference. Now it works on 10 metres, I've had a number of QSOs on 10 metres, but I've actually put up my 10 metre Moxon in the garden. I did that a month or two ago there, and the doublet was about anywhere between 1S unit to 2S units down on the Moxon. So that's 12 dB using my SDR console. 1S unit is 6 dB. So 12 dB, some were a bit more, some were a bit less. So that's a fair bit down on 10 metres. But remember, we've got a compromise antenna here. We can't get everything. So you need to remember that, okay? So on 10 metres, yes, I'm aware of that. If I specifically want to work 10 metres, I can put up the hex beam, or I could put up the Moxon in perhaps 15-20 minutes from now, and I could be using that. So I'm not really too worried. So the main bands that I like to use are 40 and 20. So that's the main bands that I use, and I say I can get onto 80 quite easily. Quirks, what other quirks have we got here? So as I said, I've had a lot of comments down on the first video, again linked down in the description, and I do have my ladder line coming down the pole, and then it comes away at 90 degrees. I need to put a bit of a sweep on that, which may help things. I can't remember who made that comment, so I need to put a bit of a curve on that, because you don't want to have it coming down at sharp angles. The wire that I'm using is DX Commander DX10, which was just big enough, or just small enough, and because it's flexible enough to fit into the DX wire spreaders that I used. And that was partly why I used that open wire feeder, because it's got even less loss than 450 ohm open wire feeder. So a really good antenna. And do I recommend it? Well, it's obviously going to depend on your situation, and depending on where your shack is, because you still need to get to get your, ideally you've got your open wire feeder direct to the tuner. So if I had, I wish when I laid out this shack and I moved in here, I wish I put another 2 little holes, and I think I could put 2 holes, and I could put some threaded rod through it, and I could put them at the same spacing, and then I could bring the open wire feeder direct into the AT4K, and that would probably give me 17 metres, and I think that would help the match, because having that 1-to-1 choke and having that 2 metres length of coax certainly does affect the impedance, and it will affect things. So it's a wonderful antenna. I'm not in the biggest garden here, so I need one size fits all, and the doublet for me is what actually does that. What am I going to change? Well, I touched on the radius of the ladder line. I may try and lengthen the antenna. I've got an idea to still stay within Ofcom limits of the RF exposure for members of the public. If I use QRO, if I'm using 100 watts, it's really not an issue. So I've got an idea, so it would be good to actually lengthen it a little bit and just see how that works, and kind of get it matched on 70 metres. But because I have that LC matched end fed for 17, I've probably got a better antenna on 17 than what the doublet would actually be. So if the doublet interests you, I would urge you to check it out, but it can be a frustrating antenna. Trying to get a match, again, once you get a match and you've got this created, it makes a big difference to actually be able to tune quickly. But it's not just as easy as hitting the button on the auto tuner. But if you're just running 100 watts and your auto tuner will match that, then you shouldn't have an issue. And just on the tuning, it's normally low impedances that have a harder time to match than the higher impedances. Right, guys, hopefully that was of some use to you. And if you've got a doublet, again, please let me know how you get on with it down in the comments, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.